So yesterday we talked about this idea between the difference between polite and being kind when we're giving out feedback as a leader. And what does that look like, the difference between having growth happen and when we're just trying to not have that problem issue, as we would say. So I wanted to walk you through a practical framework to ensure clarity of communication with your teams, especially when you're delivering feedback or trying to set expectations. This is something that I call the clarity compass. And we're going to go through this very briefly. If this is something that you're like, hey, I'd love for you to come and have a conversation with my team, or if you're a meeting planner who's wanting to have a bigger conversation about this for your organization or for your next keynote, I'd love to have a conversation with you. And I will show you how to do that in a moment. But when we're talking about the clarity compass, we want to talk about how do we do clear communication. And there's 7 steps to this. The first one is that we want to contextualize the conversation. This means that we begin by setting the stage, explain why the conversation is happening and why it's important. Because a lot of times we start a conversation, we know as the person delivering it that it's important, but we're not actually telling the people that we're delivering it to why it is important. Second, we have to be specific and direct. We have to clearly articulate the issue, behavior, or expectation without ambiguity. We don't want to talk around the issue. We don't want to beat around the bush. We don't want to add in extra fluff. We want to get straight to it so that people understand and they don't get lost in all that extra language. Third, we want to express the impact. We want to share the consequences or effects of the action or behavior to provide understanding. This means when it's coming back to feedback, like let's say that somebody said something or did something that we didn't want them to in our team, then we're going to say, hey, here's why this is important. Here's the effects of the actions of the behavior, and here's what we expect in the future. When we're talking about, hey, here's what this role is, or here's what this project that we're now implementing is going to look like, and here's your role in that, we're saying, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, here's where we should be. Here's the expectations, because we want to have that in place so that people understand. Next, we're going to invite dialogue, because we don't always know the full story when something happens. HR professionals will know this firsthand. We only hear half of the story at the beginning. So we want to encourage the other person to share their perspective, fostering a two-way conversation. We want to have conversation going back and forth on this so that we know what happened on the other person's end. What were they thinking? Was there other information or other insights that they had or didn't have that we need to now go back and we can fill in those holes where we need to if necessary, because that gives us as the leader more information for how our systems, our processes, our SOPs, and things like that are working. Fifth is that we collaborate on solutions. This is where we work together to develop actionable steps to address the issue and prevent reoccurrence. So with that feedback pieces, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? A lot of times that means going back and saying, where were the holes that we need to plug in this process? We also then, sixth, need to confirm understanding and ensure that both parties have a mutual understanding of the discussion and agreed upon actions. So this has to be collaborative. We have to agree on what's coming next. And it's not just watching somebody begrudgingly agree. Whether you have children or not, there's probably been a time where you have said, hey, I need you to apologize, or you've been asked to apologize and you've just gone, I'm sorry. And you didn't really mean it. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're not saying, hey, we're just confirming understanding because of the fact that we're just doing it. We're saying, hey, I see that you don't want to apologize. Explain to me why. So we can always hop back up to that explanation piece if we're not having some understanding that we can actually say, hey, this is how we're going to move forward. Whether that's remorse or whether that's, hey, yes, I understand what my job is here and here's the things that I'm taking on. I've been in multiple organizations when I've come in and trained where people go, here's all the things I have on my plate, and this isn't actually part of my job. And then we start going through what their job is and find out that that is part of their job. Or we find out, hey, this piece is part of your job, but this piece really should be over here on this person's plate. And then having to figure out how do we move those things around and create clear expectations of who is doing something and what are the expectations of them and what is the KPI that's connected to that expectation so that we can actually measure it. And then finally, it comes to follow up. We want to revisit the conversation after some time to assess progress and reinforce accountability. So when it comes to feedback, saying, hey, maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month. I like to do something called a 10-10-10 when I do training. So it's 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 months. For smaller things like a feedback loop, we want to have something that's maybe it's 3 days later. Like, hey, I see that you've been working with so-and-so that you had this confrontation with. How are things going? Has the things that we've put in place worked? If not, then we get to go back through this process and go, okay, what are things that we need to be doing to move this forward now? Because at the end of the day, it comes back to that clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So as much as there's going to be times that you don't want to deal with things, that things are not going to be comfortable, as the leader, it is your job to be the person who goes, hey, I see this uncomfortable situation happening, and I'm going to cut it off at the knees before it destroys something bigger, before it cuts into our productivity, before it cuts into that bottom line that we're talking about. Because as the leader, my job is to create the community and the culture around my team so that there's trust and I can move things forward. And if we don't have these hard conversations, trust cannot exist. So as you're going throughout your day and as you're finishing up your week this week, thinking about how can I use this clarity compass to move myself forward? I would love to have a deeper conversation about how you can use this clarity compass in your organization and come and do a keynote for you or come and train your team on how to use this and use real life examples that are happening or that have happened in your organization. And you can schedule a call with me to figure out a best time for you at kabrinaashley.com/strategy-call. And I look forward to chatting with you, and I will see you next week.